Hello, everyone. This is Janelle Denzin. I'm the HMIS data analyst for CoC, and this training is meant to be a part of the coordinated entry trainings, but it's also part of, it's just about the unsheltered provider, which is used for other processes besides coordinated entry as well. So this training will have a lot to do with coordinated entry. However, it will also touch on a couple of other processes as well. So the main focus here is just the unsheltered provider. So we're going to talk about the purpose of the provider, what it means exactly to be unsheltered, when to enter a household into the provider, and I'm going to demo that for you. We're also going to talk about how unsheltered households are prioritized for housing, and in recognition that it is oftentimes difficult to get complete information from unsheltered individuals the very first time you encounter them. I'm just going to sort of give a sort of hierarchy of like what we need the most so that you can help that client get prioritized and housed as quickly as possible, and sort of fill in other data that we need as you can do that. And then I'm gonna share some additional resources that are available to you besides this video. Okay, so this is sort of, in your EDA list, this is what the unsheltered provider will look like. It's provider 1695. It adds a way to track and prioritize for housing those households who are unsheltered. So just to talk about what unsheltered means, it means living in a place not meant for habitation. So some examples are in a car or van, in an abandoned building, on the streets, in a tent, things like this. Things that are not unsheltered are if they were unsheltered previously, but tonight they're in a hotel motel paid for by any party. If they are in the hospital, in an emergency shelter, if they're living with friends or family in a house or apartment, then those are not unsheltered. When and when not to enter a household. So if you're an access point and you find an unsheltered household who will be remaining unsheltered for at least tonight, so you come across them, you offer them housing, or actually you offer them shelter, or even to put them up in a hotel or anything, and they refuse because of whatever reason, and they're going to remain unsheltered, then you would enter that household into the unsheltered provider. If you're a residential project who is exiting a household so like you, this client is in your facility and they are exiting, and you are aware that they are going to just like go back to their encampment, or they're going to go back to living in their car, no matter what the reason is, then when you exit them from your shelter, you would then enter them into the unsheltered provider. And the things that you would need to find out, we'll talk about that later in the presentation. But you would definitely want to know like where they're going to be living in their car, like the Walmart parking lot, or so that you can contact them again and make contact again and try to get them housed. The times not to enter a household into the unsheltered provider is if you find an unsheltered household that you manage to take into your shelter that day, then you wouldn't put them in the unsheltered provider. Even though they were unsheltered when you met them, if they're not going to be unsheltered tonight, then you would not enter them into the unsheltered provider. Another example of when not to enter it is this household is normally unsheltered, but tonight they're in the hospital. or tonight they were put up in a hotel motel by a third party, or even by themselves. Or if the household is already a Path Street outreach client, they don't need to be then also entered into the unsheltered provider. So to talk about reporting, the data that you're entering, and we're going to go through how to do that and all that soon. But the data that does get entered into the unsheltered provider is used for a few different processes, sort of like I alluded to in the beginning. So in terms of coordinated entry, it shows up in the PSH and RRH prioritization report. And this is the report that the homeless planning regions use to prioritize clients in their region or households in their region for permanent housing. We also use this provider for the point in time count. So when you all are sending in your unsheltered tools from the point in time count, we are then going to enter those clients into the unsheltered provider. If the and that those clients will be entered on the 23rd. They'll have an entry date of the 23rd and an exit date of the 24th. This is 2018. So if you're listening to this in other years, it might be a different date. But whatever the night of the point in time count is, that'll be their entry date, and their exit date is the day after. And that's how we tell which clients were entered into the unsheltered provider for the point in time count. If there are clients in the unsheltered provider who are unsheltered on the night of the point in time count, those should be, at least for 2018, I'm not sure how we're doing it in 2019 yet, but for 2018, if a client is unsheltered on the night of the point in time count and they're already in the unsheltered provider, then the enumerator, the county contact, whoever it is that would be responsible for this, would write the client ID of that client on the unsheltered tool. And then for the veterans by name lists, so as you know, our CoC is trying to end veteran homelessness in the balance of state. So we have a by name list that does not have names on it. And we are using the unsheltered provider to track any unsheltered veterans, and then those unsheltered veterans turn up on the veterans report and the veterans by name list to be prioritized for that purpose. And then we're going to have referrals reporting, but I don't even know how soon that's going to be, but there will be reporting on that too. And so just to be clear, also something about reporting to do with this provider, you might not want to run an APR on the unsheltered provider because it will return households from all 80 counties in the balance of state and will include the unsheltered households counted for each point in time count since 2017. So it wouldn't really mean much to run the APR on this provider, though you can, you can do it. But as long as you understand what you're looking at when you do run it, just be aware that it's including unsheltered people from all over the balance of state. And it also will include unsheltered households who are counted for the point in time count. If your date range crosses that date, right? So just be aware of that. And if you need any reporting on the unsheltered provider, that is not available because it is on the prioritization report. But if you need something, you are welcome to send in a ticket and we will see what we can do. Okay, so to the most important data points. So basically, if you can get a date of birth, that's pretty important, even if it's approximate. because we want to categorize people if they're as to whether or not they are children, or if they're youth, or if they're adults, and if they're in families and what that configuration is. Also, veteran status. As I mentioned before, we are trying to end veteran homelessness. So if you can find out if that person is a veteran, it'd be very helpful to get that. Also, you're already going to know what county they're in, so that's something you don't really need to ask them so much as you being sure to record that in the assessment when you put the client data in. Another really important piece to put into the assessment, if you know it or even can guess it, is the relationship to head of household. Because we really just need to know who the head of household is, and that's really the most important thing. And then another very important piece is the contact. And when I'm demoing this, I will show you what I'm talking about. But especially the notes field, because that's going to tell us where the client is. And if you're not putting in where the client can be found again, then it's less likely that person is going to be, even if we do prioritize them, we have to be able to find them again to, get them into the housing. And then the length of time homeless and the disabilities questions would be also very good to try to get, because we need to calculate whether they're considered chronic or not, because we're also trying to end chronic homelessness in the balanced state. So you may be wondering when do we ever exit a person out of the unsheltered provider? Because being that they're unsheltered, you can't tell if they're unsheltered every single day. Like if somebody's in your shelter, you can tell that they're there every day, but if they're unsheltered, you just kind of have to guess that they're still unsheltered or if they're not or whatever. So basically, if a case manager has attempted 3 contacts or it has been 30 days since there's been any contact, the client should be exited with a destination of no exit interview completed. That should keep our unsheltered provider fairly clear of people we just haven't followed up with, or that we just don't know what happened. So when we're talking about the unsheltered household and their path through our coordinated entry system, this is kind of a visual as to how that household is meant to traverse our coordinated entry system. So basically, we at the front of our system is an access point, and this is where people who are unsheltered are meant to enter the system. At the access point, we'll enter that household into the unsheltered provider. That data then shows up on the PSH and RH prioritization report. And when the coordinated entry team meets, they will prioritize that household for permanent housing, depending on their VI-FSPDAT score and other factors. So once that household has been prioritized for permanent housing, then whoever entered that client will then enter a referral for that client to whoever it was decided that client was going to be housed by, right? So if in the meeting it's discussed that this unsheltered household seems like they're more appropriate for rapid rehousing, then after the meeting, the access point person will go back, open up the unsheltered record, and create a referral from the unsheltered provider to the rapid rehousing provider. Then the permanent housing project, so that would be the rapid rehousing project in this case, would enter the household into HMIS, into their rapid rehousing project, and close out the referral. The household moves into permanent housing, at which time the household gets a housing move-in date in the rapid rehousing project, the permanent housing project, and the household gets exited from the unsheltered provider. So there is a moment there where the client is going to still be in the unsheltered provider and the rapid rehousing provider at the same time, because they're in the rapid rehousing project because they've been accepted and they have accepted, the offer of housing. They just haven't been housed yet. And so during that period of time, it is okay for those project stays to overlap. And then once they're housed, they get exited from the unsheltered provider, and then they get the housing move-in date in the rapid rehousing project. We're going to go through all that. So for the point in time count, I think I already covered this, actually. You just want to make sure you're updating your household's information every time you make contact with them, and keep up with updating their whereabouts so that they can be found. And you just want to make sure your unsheltered households are still unsheltered on the night of the pit, and that when they're found, that their client ID is written on the Unsheltered tool. Okay, so we're going to demo some things. First, we're going to enter a household into the unsheltered provider. So I am shadowing R. Matthews, which is sort of our demo user. And then I'm going to, so this fake user is attached to the family shelter provider. But I'm going to EDA over to the unsheltered provider right here. So I'm going to go to client point, and I'm going to enter a fake client. So we're searching for the client, no matches. And I'm going to add new client with this information. And this is a household. So I'm going to do that. And I'm going to say it's a couple with no children. Couldn't find them, so we're going to do add new client with this information. So now we have our household. I'm going to do continue, and this one is the head of household. And even though this data doesn't really go anywhere, I'm going to fill it in anyway because sometimes it's helpful to folks. Save and exit. And then I go to the summary tab. And I'm going to add the ROI. add entry exit. So I met this couple. They're living in their van in the Walmart parking lot, and they are from this county, but they lost their place in December, and they've been living in their van ever since. Now, when I enter into the unsheltered provider, you always have to use the entry exit type of standard. So I'm going to go standard, and I met them on the 11th. And now you can see that I have all of this. We have this reminder here about how this is only for unsheltered clients. Don't enter anybody else in here. And then just a sort of shortened version of the regular assessment that you're used to. And you also have access to the VI-FSPDAT and the VI-FSPDAT. And since this is a family, I did a VI-FSPDAT on them. And as you remember, I'm sure, any unsheltered household that you come across, they need to be VI-FSPDATed immediately. So I have a VI-FSPDAT on them. I'm going to do that in a second. First, I'm going to fill out this. So pardon me. Oops. So for the disabilities, I'm just going to say no on everything, and then they do have a chronic health condition of long duration. Now, this set of questions here, the name of the questions seem off, but the header here is meant to clarify that what we really want you to be answering here is about their current episode of unsheltered homelessness. So all of the clients in the unsheltered provider, their residence prior is going to be place not met, because this is about the current situation, even though it says residence prior. But what we're looking for is the length of stay in this situation. This episode of being unsheltered, not being literally homeless, but this episode of being unsheltered. So if they've been sleeping in their van, I said in December, so that's, let's see, it's like, yeah, like this, 1 week or more, but less than 1 month. And I think I had Adams County before, and this is the county that they're from. And they're telling me that their last zip was 43. Let's see. And then if I just click apply zip code information, we don't need the street address and the apartment number and things like this. We really are just after the zip. So you can just fill that out and put in your zip code, and then click, apply zip code information, and it'll fill in the city and the state for us and everything. And just leave that start date to match to your entry date, and your county of residence is all going to fill in as well. So that's fine if these two are blank. So now we're looking at the length of time homeless questions. So this question is a little different than length of stay in previous place. So that if we're looking at what the approximate date the homelessness started, that means if prior to being unsheltered, they were in an emergency shelter or they were unsheltered but somewhere else, then we want the date that all of this started, with when they first became literally homeless. So literally homeless versus unsheltered would include things like being in a shelter, being put up in a hotel motel by an emergency shelter, or by any third party. And it would also include things like if they were homeless prior, literally homeless prior, and they entered like the hospital and they were there for less than 90 days, then that would also count within this time. So like you wouldn't need to stop going back if they were in the hospital for a second and then they were literally homeless just prior to that. So, and if you need help figuring out how to figure out what date this is, just call us and let us know. Send in a ticket and we can help you with that. So, like I said, they lost their literal housing in December. So we're just going to put that date that they lost their apartment. So the number of times they've been on the streets in emergency shelters or safe haven in the past 3 years, including today. Talking to them, this has happened before. And over the past 3 years, they've probably been homeless about 10 of those months. 10 months over the last 3 years. And we're going to put that there is some domestic violence history. But that is not what's going on right now. And then, as I was referring to in the sort of list of really important things, we add a contact. So if I click add here, the date of contact is the date of the entry date and the start date as well. And we're also going to make the end date that same thing. So we're going to definitely staying on street ES or SH will be yes. And every household that is going to be entered into the unsheltered provider, that's always going to be yes. And then here is where the important part gets entered, and that is that where you met the household, where they're staying. Well, actually, I'll just staying in a Walmart parking lot in their van. And then we'll save that. And I personally would recommend keeping this free of personally identifying information, but you don't have to. If you do include personally identifying information in here, be sure that when you print any of the reporting that has this information in it, that you're not, that you're shredding it or you're filing it and you're not emailing it or, letting it get out in any way. So I'm going to save that, go to the top and answer all of this for this client. And let's just pretend I'll just go through and do that. You can cut it. So as you notice, this contacts for the non-head of household, we do not need to put a contact record on every person in the household. Only the head of household will need a contact record. So I'm going to save that. And then I'm going to go over to the VI-FSPDAT and add that for the, not for her, but for her. Because I want to make sure that I'm putting the FSPDAT score on the head of household, not on the non-head of household. And I SPDATed them on the 11th when I met them. So I'm going to leave that date the same. So I'm just going to go through here really quick. And calculate that. You got a 16 because I answered yes on everything. But anyway, obviously I would be entering that from what I actually went over with the client, not just hitting yes on everything. So I'm going to do save. And that's all I need to do at this point because they're not a veteran. Once you've entered your household and your ROI and your entry exit into the unsheltered provider, you'll want to add yourself as the case manager for this household. This helps us to know which access point the household is coming from. So you'll do add case manager. You only need to do it on the head of household. And you'll do me if it's you. And if it isn't, then you can use any of these types to get the correct information in. Now, the important piece here is that you choose your provider should be the name of the access point. So in this case, it was the family shelter, emergency shelter, and this would have, if this was set up for coordinated entry yet, it would have an ESAP here, which means emergency shelter access point. So anyway, this is where you sort of link your access point to that unsheltered household. So it's an important piece, although I recognize it's like not quite in use yet, but as time goes on, this is going to be become more and more important so that we can sort of run reporting on access points and things like this, like how many people are coming through which access points. Then you'll leave your end date open, which I know is not always what we do in some of these cases, but you want to leave that open because that will mean that you're still their case manager until you add an end date to it. So let's do add case manager. So that's how you enter a case manager. So since I haven't met yet with my my coordinated entry team, I do not know, what their priority is going to be or anything. So I really, for now, I've done everything I can do until that meeting. So let's say we had the meeting, and I'm going to show you how to run the PSH and RRH prioritization report. So we've sort of taken off our access point hat, and now we're putting on our coordinated entry hat. We're going to run the PSH and RRH prioritization by county report. And it's right in here, balance the state, as needed, PSH and RRH prioritization. Okay, so this tab has your head of households client ID. So this is for households only, this PSH prioritization. And then there's a singles tab for people who are just singles and they're eligible for PSH. And this helps the PSH providers because some of them only serve singles, some of them have maybe a family unit open, not a singles, so they might want to see those separately, plus it's just easier to split them out in the data that way. So this tab is showing anyone who is literally homeless right now and eligible for PSH that's in a household that has more than one person in their household. And this tab is showing people who are literally homeless right now and eligible for PSH, and they're singles. So, and then you can also see some other things about them. So this one is where it says unsheltered in Licking County. This means that they're in the unsheltered provider, and the county field says Licking. So any of the clients that have been entered into the unsheltered provider where the county is Licking will show up on this report because we ran it on Licking County. So they are showing up right along with the people who are in shelters in Licking County and transitional housing in Licking County. And you see here that the transitional housing clients are sort of grayed out because they're really a lot of folks who are in transitional housing, while they're considered literally homeless, they're not necessarily looking to get out of transitional housing at that time. So we have those in gray, but we do have them showing because they are considered literally homeless. So you can see that which ones are chronic, which ones are nearly chronic, like they're maybe one stay away from being considered chronic. Shows if any of them have zero income, if there's DV involved, and how many days they've been homeless. And then here it also gives their VI-FSPDAT score. So it really is meant to help you in your meetings to prioritize people for housing. So this person, for instance, has a really high VI-FSPDAT score, and they're not chronic, and they haven't been homeless that many days, but there must be something about them that makes the situation more urgent because they have a pretty sort of a higher score than some of the other folks on the list. So then there's also the rapid rehousing prioritization tabs, so that in your meetings you can discuss who to prioritize for rapid rehousing. So I'm not sure why there's no FSPDAT scores on these, but there are on the singles, and this is meant to help people in the region to prioritize their literally homeless, any of their households in the region who are literally homeless and have been either they're unsheltered right now, or if they're in a shelter, they've been there more than 5 days. Shelter, transitional housing, or safe haven. So if you just entered somebody into a shelter and then you run this report the next day, that person is not going to show on this list because in the way that we're doing coordinated entry, we're not only are we not VI-FSPDATing folks until 5 to 8 days after they've been in a shelter, but we're also wanting to allow some time for folks to self-resolve, and this is the way that we've done that. So we're not wanting to see every single person that's in a shelter or transitional housing or safe haven at the moment. We just want to see those folks that have been in a shelter, transitional housing, or safe haven for more than 5 days. Or if they're unsheltered, we'll see them right away. Well, the next day, because ART has a day lag. So, and these highlighted client IDs are veterans. So those should be prioritized as well. And then there's just a tab with contact information in case that's an issue. And then this most folks won't be using. This one most folks won't be using. And like I said, I made the date today so that there wouldn't be any clients here. But this would show who's been recently housed that was literally homeless prior. And this is sort of just the raw data that shows the SPDAT scores, and then of course how you ran the report is on here as well. So this is sort of the report that we're talking about when we talk about the prioritization report, and everything kind of is meant to be organized around what you see on this report. So once you've run this report and had your meeting, let's say our person did not get prioritized this time around. That would be odd because their SPDAT score is like 16. But say that there were other 16s and there wasn't enough resources, and our person is going to have to remain unsheltered for a little longer. So we contact them to check on them, on their welfare, to see how they're doing. So I'm going to go back back to my user, and I'm going to enter data as again. And I'm going to search for my client. I'm going to go in here. And we reached out to them and found out that they are still unsheltered, but they have found someone's driveway that they've been allowed to park in. So we're going to record that. And we're going to, let's see, I'm going to go to the entry exit tab because I want to add an interim, right? Because we're just wanting to update their information. And so our review date, let's say that was yesterday. So I just want to come down to the contacts here, and I'm going to add a review date, and I'm going to click these dates and make sure they all match. They're still unsheltered. Got permission to stay in their van in front of Marysville Street. All right, let's put so now we have an updated place of where they are, so that the next person that needs to go find this client, like let's say we get housing for them soon, can go find them. They're not going to go to the Walmart parking lot because they're not there anymore. And we have the updated place of where they are. So that solves that. And now you have an interim on them. And you could also VI-FSPDAT them. So let's say I also, while I caught up with them, we also did another VI-FSPDAT. And in that case, I would do add, and then I would get another record in here. I would fill all that out. And then, just like any sub-assessment, it would show up here stacked as another, they'd have another score. It might be higher, it might be lower, whatever it is, but it would be more up to date than this other one that we did on the 11th. If anything changed. You don't want to do it like too much because it takes a lot of time. But if something shifted and there's sort of a different situation, you might want to VI-FSPDAT them. In this case, we probably wouldn't because there's only a change in, vague change in location. But if you do, then that is how you would do that. Okay. So let's say there was another meeting and they ran the report, and this time our person got prioritized. And they got prioritized to rapid rehousing, which of course if they had a score of 16, they would likely get prioritized to PSH. But just for ease of use, we're gonna do rapid rehousing. This client, now that we've been to the meeting and we found out where they're gonna go, we come back into the client's record and I'm on the summary tab and I'm doing add referral. So for referrals, we only create the referral on the head of household, so we do not need to check our people up here. This only applies to services and referrals. So nothing is changing though in regards to creating an entry exit or an interim. You still have to include all your household members on those. But for services and referrals, you can just do it on the head of household. And I know for a lot of you that have been doing services for years and years on the HCRP side, I think we've always trained to put your services on all of your household members. But that has changed, and we are saying that you only need to add services to the head of household and referrals to the head of household. So anyway, we're going to skip that household members section there, and we're going to select rapid rehousing programs and click add terms and go to search results. So I added that term and it brought me down here to the search results. And then if we look in here, it's not there, so we're going to look at this. So this happens to be A, but if your county doesn't start with A, you can click on not I apparently. You can click on whatever letter your county starts with, and you'll be taken to a fairly short list of providers that offer the terms that you just added, right? So I just added rapid rehousing. You see here that is showing every rapid rehousing project in a county that starts with H. So depending on how common your letter is for your county, you should have a fairly short list. So Adams County, and then we're going to add that provider as a selected provider to offer that service. So then we're going to answer some questions about the referral. The referral is being made as of today, and as I discussed, since we are only entering referrals for the head of household, we're going to indicate whether this person with a referral is part of a household or if they're a single. We use the referral ranking to do that, and even though obviously referral ranking doesn't have anything to do with if they're a household or a single, but this is what the way we sort of figured out to help folks see that whether they're a household or a single in the sort of dashboard reporting. You'll see what I mean. I'll look at that in a second. So anyway, they're a household, and I entered a VI-FSPDAT for this family. So I'm going to go find that, and it's right there. And so the projected follow-up date, I'm going to follow up with them on the 20th just to see how things are going. You don't have to use this, but it's probably good to do it because your dashboard will sort of remind you to follow up with this client on whatever date you're saying here that that you need to. And then you just want to make sure your date of need matches your needs referral date. These two dates should match. And then you don't need to do anything here, and you do save all. And you see here you clicked add referral from the summary tab, which is in the client information world. And once you did that, it switched you over to the service transactions world. And now when you come out of your referral, it's dropping you right into the referrals tab in the service transactions sort of universe. So that's what you're seeing here. If you go to entire service history, you would see that you actually created a need and a referral by doing all of that. The need is like it's coming from the unsheltered provider, and the referral provider is who you referred it to, the client to. So, back to dashboard. Oh, that's cool. No, that does not do what I thought it did. So then we're going to go back into the client information world, and now we can see here that there's an outstanding outgoing referral to the Adams County Rapid Rehousing Project. So since we are the access point, we have done, I just want to go back to that graphic so we can sort of talk about where we are. So as the access point, remember, we entered the household into the unsheltered provider. We ran the prioritization report, and we had a pretend meeting where the household actually was not prioritized yet. So we followed up with the client, we updated where they're at. Then there was another meeting, so we're still here. And then the household did get prioritized. And they got prioritized. The type of permanent housing that they got prioritized for is rapid rehousing. So at that point, the access point creates a referral to the permanent housing project. And that's sort of what we just did. So we're still wearing our sort of access point hat. You can see what hat you're wearing is sort of goes with the colors of this graphic, right? So as the access point, our last step is once they're actually housed, we'll just exit them from the unsheltered provider. So but now it sort of begins where those who are wearing permanent housing hats come in. So if you are part of a rapid rehousing project or a PSH project, you haven't really had anything to do with this process yet, except, unless you are also involved with the coordinated entry team, and that you were part of that meeting and you were wearing your coordinated entry hat. But if you are a permanent housing provider, and that's the only hat you wear, then you may not have heard of this client until you received either the email or the referral in your reporting of this household that is currently unsheltered and needs housing in your PSH or RRH. In this case, in your RRH. But many regions only have, they don't have this many people to where there's only one hat being worn by people. So likely those of you who are in permanent housing roles are also in coordinated entry roles. And that's good. I mean, we want that, right? But as the permanent housing provider, you're receiving this referral from the unsheltered provider that an access point has entered. And then the coordinated entry process sort of prioritize their household for your project. So as the permanent housing project, we are going to log in as if we're wearing that hat. So the permanent housing project enters the household into HMIS. So we're going we're going to shadow Sharon. So now we are the Rapid Rehousing Project, and we're going to EDA. So I am Sharon, and I happen to know that my counts report is set up that any numbers on this row are referrals to the shelter that I also enter for, right? As Sharon, pretending I'm Sharon. Sorry, Sharon, to use you like this, but for demonstration purposes. So, and this particular count is referring to any clients that were referred to my Rapid Rehousing Project. So I'm wanting to find the client that was referred to my Rapid Rehousing Project. Okay, so I see here that it's client 208676. The referral date was the 16th. This is a household, and they need some rapid rehousing. They are currently unsheltered because here they are sitting in the unsheltered provider, and they were referred to me, and their SPDAT score is 16. So I want to go to that client's record, and I can just go to it straight from here. And that report just minimized itself into the left sidebar here, just so you know. That's how that works. If you don't want it to do that, you can just X that out. So, all right, so I'm going to get a sense for who this client is. They're 31. It's a couple, no children. And there's this referral to me. So I want to get a sense for the client. So I'm going to come in here into their assessment. And, oh, yeah. I can see here it only shows one of the contacts because I went into the entry and not into the interim. So just to be sure, I see there's an interim there, so I want to make sure that there's no updated information in here, because I don't want to go out to the Walmart parking lot for no reason. And yes, look, see, there is an update. So this tells me that they're currently in their van in front of this address, right? So I got that, and now as the Rapid Rehousing Project, I either, and sometimes their phone number can be in there or whatever else can be in there as to how to reach them again. So if it was their phone number, I would call them. If there is no phone number, then I would just go out to that address and look for a van and talk to the people there. And then I would sort of do an intake with them and ask them and sort of tell them, like, I'm with Rapid Rehousing and this is what we do, and sort of case manage that. And let's say you come to the conclusion that you are accepting them into your program and they're going to remain unsheltered until you house them. They do not want to go to the shelter, or either that or there is no shelter. So you make the decision that they're now in your project, whether they're housed or not, right? So they have an entry date. So we're going to add an entry date for this client, this household, into your Rapid Rehousing Project. As always, this is just like any other project entry that you always do. You're going to enter them into your Rapid Rehousing Project. And most of that data will already be there. The things that were not in the unsheltered provider assessment will show up as, you need to fill these in. So when you're there, if you get a way to collect their income information, their non-cash benefits, their health insurance information for each of the household members, you can fill that in here. We're just going to say no on everything. just for time's sake. And since they haven't moved in yet, we're leaving this blank. So we're gonna go over to the other client's house, assessment, and do the same thing, and then save and exit. Okay, so at this point, the client has an entry into the rapid rehousing project and a standing entry-exit into the unsheltered provider. And that is correct, because they're still unsheltered and they have been accepted into the rapid rehousing project. They are not housed yet. So they don't need to be exited out of the unsheltered yet. So we also have the issue of the outstanding incoming referral. Since we have accepted that household into our project, we want to close that referral so that they don't show up in any referrals reports as needing someone to take them. So I'm going to edit this referral. I'm going to come down here and select for the referral outcome, accepted. I'm just going to leave that follow-up information alone because the user is not me. If I was the same person that set up the referral and I had a follow-up in here for myself, then I would probably say yes here and the date that I completed the follow-up. But since this is for Richard Matthews, he can do that as he wants. So I'm just going to leave that for him. And then for the need status, make this closed. Outcome of need fully met. And this we don't need to do because it's fully met. But if it wasn't fully met, we could indicate why we weren't able to meet the need of the client. So at this point, this referral will be closed out because the referral outcome has been filled in and the need status has been closed. So save and exit, and then as Sharon, if I go back to my dashboard and I click refresh here, this turns to 0 now because I took care of that referral. So that is all that needs to be done here. So now let's say the rapid rehousing project has given them a move-in date and said, I have housing for you. It's available on the 21st. And so let's get you, ready to move in. And let's say the 21st comes around and they move in. And so then we want to update, we want to update HMIS to indicate that that person has been housed. Now, if I'm Sharon, there's 2 people that needs to touch this record. Well, assuming everybody's wearing separate hats. There's 2 people that need to touch this record. Sharon, over at the RRH, and Richard Matthews at the access point. So what Sharon needs to do as the rapid rehousing person is go into that client, is that right? Yeah. And give them an interim and a move-in date. So I'm going to go here, add an interim onto their rapid rehousing project stay. And I'm going to add an interim, and it's an update. And we have all the people checked, and that's correct because this is an interim. And it's the 21st. I don't know if they'll let me future date that. Probably not. Oh, they did. So then I can put that their housing move-in date is today. Today. And oh yeah, and while I'm in here, I can see that I forgot to fill in the HUD verifications from before. So I'm just gonna do that. Nope, I'm not, because I need to go back to the entry exit to do that. I'm just gonna, no, but I'll do that in a second. So I'm gonna click save, and then go over to the other person in the household and save the same thing. Now, as I noticed while I was in the interim that I did not fill in my my income and my non-cash correctly. So I'm going to come down here and I had to go back in through the entry pencil though, because that's when this data was verified as of. So I'm going to put no on everything. And no on everything. Okay, so that's corrected. Usually you won't have to do that, hopefully, maybe. So as Sharon, as the person with the rapid rehousing hat on, we're done. This client is housed in the rapid rehousing project. Well, we're done as far as this far. We haven't completely, served the client to where they're going to be ready, to carry on their housing for good and sustain that yet, but we're going to work toward that. And it won't be completely done, of course, until the exit date. But as far as them being housed and the person with the rapid rehousing hat on, we're all good as far as HMIS is concerned. Now, as to Richard Matthews, though, the access point needs to also go back in there and pull up that household and exit them from the unsheltered provider, because they are no longer unsheltered, right, as of the 21st. So I'm going to do 01212018. And then destination, we'll pick rental by client with rapid rehousing or equivalent subsidy. And we'll check all the people, which is very important, and do save and continue. And there's no exit assessment when you're getting out of the unsheltered provider. We don't need to know anything more at this point. We just want to know where they went. So there's nothing to do there. Just click exit, and they are now exited from the unsheltered provider, and they're in the rapid rehousing provider, and with a move-in date. So I just want to go through my demos and unsheltered. Okay, yeah. So that carries us through this process, from being unsheltered to being housed, with coordinated entry, using HMIS, and other back channels for communications too. Because another thing about coordinated entry is we're definitely recommending that households have warm handoff, I guess is what it's called. And that just means, like, you don't just refer someone to a provider without having discussed it with them first. Whether that's through email or through a phone call or the meetings that your region is having about prioritization. You don't want to just surprise somebody with a referral that for someone they've never seen or knew about yet, unless that's what you'll decide that on that everybody's cool with, and that's sort of an expected way for you all to work through how y'all want to work your workflow. But our recommendation is to warm hand off your clients in case anything is missed in the system or otherwise. So I I think that's really all I needed to demo. Exiting someone from the Rapid Housing Project, nothing changed there. Like that's just all, what you've always been doing. So I don't think there's anything that needs to be demoed there. However, there is one last piece that I was going to demo for you, and that is how to run a data quality report on the unsheltered provider. So we sort of covered why you wouldn't want to run an APR on the unsheltered provider, and that is because everybody's entering data into there. So when you run any report on the unsheltered provider, you want a way to only focus on, say, a collection of counties or one county, or even who entered the household. So if we go to public folder and just your regular data quality monthly folder that you're used to going to, in there is unsheltered clients DQ, meaning data quality. So we're going to view report. The prompts that come up are your dates, so your start dates. I just have that going back to April of this year because that's when we first created the unsheltered provider. Not many people were actually using it then, but we did have some people sort of testing it and stuff. But you can run it back to however far back you started using it. That's fine. And then as you know, if you run ART reports very often, your effective date and your end date always should be the same day. They should always match. So those two dates have to match. Then the other two options that you have to sort of filter this report is you can either select some counties or you can choose a user. So you can actually only look at clients that you've entered into the unsheltered provider if you want to do that. I'm going to run it on a county, and oh yeah, so if you want to run it on a county, this is a tricky part of this report, and I apologize for this. I wish I could control this, but in order to fill out a county, you first have to go to this enter effective date under here and go to just pick today's date. I don't think it matters what date you pick. And then your list will populate. All right, so I'm going to choose Fairfield and Licking and then run query. You can see here that there's different tabs as usual. The completeness tab is just basic, how much of this information do we have, how much of it do we still need. And also, please be aware that you're not being, I guess I hear the term dinged a lot for the data quality of any of the households in here. This provider is meant to help you with tracking your unsheltered population. We're not trying to, hold something over you and make you meet something that's just not helpful to you. We're giving you this data quality report so that you can see how the data in there is looking, right? So it's broken down by user so that you can so there's somebody to contact about these clients. And if you ever see one where the cell is red in color, that means you forgot to make the entry exit type standard. And that really matters, because if you choose the wrong entry exit type, you won't get the assessment, and then you can't answer the date of birth field, and you can't answer the county field, and you can't answer the relationship to household field. So you're going to have a lot of missings if that doesn't get done right. So that's why I use the red color, which I know is kind of severe, but it really makes a difference. If you, I mean, it kind of creates a big problem if you choose the wrong entry-exit type. So remember, when you're using that unsheltered provider, always use the entry-exit type of standard. So this just indicates the age, and I kind of have sort of how I presented in here, like which things are super duper important. Vet status is also super important, but your county is like, that's what makes it show on your prioritization report. If you don't have the county in there, that household is going to show on everyone's prioritization report, because that household might be in the county that the people are running it. We can't tell what county they're in. They could be in any of the 80 ones, so they're going to show. So it's really important that you add your county here. So then you can sort of see like your entry and exit dates and sort of what is missing. And it's in red, but like this is the kind of information that you might not have been able to get yet. And that's fine. This is, like I said, this is not, you're not going to be like judged by this or anything. We know this is like more outreach kind of thing, and that collecting this kind of data on the unsheltered population can be an iterative process. But what we do really need are, sort of the things that you as the case manager already know, like their county, their relationship to head of household, their age bracket at least. So that is one piece of this data quality report. Another piece is looking at whether or not you created a contact on that client's record. And that's really important because like I explained in the demo, that is where you describe where the client is and how they can be found again. If we don't have that information, then this becomes just data that we don't really have an idea of how to deal with. So it's real important that your contacts get created and updated as you make further contacts with that household. This tab checks to see if you created a case manager record on your client. So as described in the demo for how to add a case manager to a client or household, this looks at whether or not that was done, and if it was done, whether the provider was correctly switched to the appropriate access point that's responsible for that household. And then we have this completeness for PIT tab, and this lists what client IDs we have in the counties that we ran this report on, where they are currently located, but you remember over here there weren't any contacts created on any of these clients, so they don't have the where field here. So as to where they are, we just have to trust that they know that in some other way besides HMIS. But ideally, they're next to every client ID would be sort of a description of where this household is staying. And this is only people who were in the unsheltered provider, open in the unsheltered provider on the night of the PIT count. Those are the only people that'll show here. So if you have some people here, then you want to check to see what sort of things that we need for the point in time count, what data pieces are missing at the time, so that when you do touch base with them on the night of the point in time count, you can be sure to get that race, that ethnicity, the domestic violence, or their, for this client, you would want to get their times homeless, or the date that their homelessness started. And so this just sort of gives an idea of like what specific things you need to touch base with them about. Because really all you need to do for someone like this, where you have all their information, is, are you still in the same place? Are you still unsheltered? If yes, then like we'll just fill out a tool on you and put your client ID and add a contact maybe if anything changed as to where they are, and then that's really all you would need to do, is make sure that that client ID is on the Unsheltered tool when you send it in, and we can match those folks up. So I think that's it, and then I just have the typical end of the report page here that shows how you ran the report. So this should be, if you're using the Unsheltered provider, this should be something that you run every month or so, or more if you need to check that you're entering everybody correctly, and so this way you're sure that those unsheltered households that you're making contact with, we have enough information for them to show on the prioritization report. And that'll help them be housed quicker, the more information we can have. So I hope that helps. This presentation will be available on our help desk portal. This slide presentation will be available with the recording, so that you can have it for reference. Okay, just to cover also sort of some resources for everyone to do with not only the Unsheltered provider, but just coordinated entry in general. We have on our help desk, our portal, at HMIS.cohio.org, you'll see this. And if you go to Service Point, there is a list of workflows. We are currently working on updating the workflows to include the coordinated entry workflow, but for now, this is what's available. And the Unsheltered workflow is available here. And when you download that, you see a more detailed workflow that sort of have your meta steps, and then you have the like how to do each thing. And in there is sort of gets in, like prior to even logging into HMIS, it sort of gets into how to engage with the client, with a client or a household that's unsheltered. And then here you log in, and it talks about households, entry exits, referrals, interims, and exiting your client. And it also has this information that was also in the presentation about how, at what point do you decide to exit a client who can't be found. So that is available to you, and this is very helpful because even though you might hear this and see me do it, it's easy to forget details like choose entry exit type of standard, for instance. A lot of people struggle with that because it's so different than the other workflows. So that's available. Also, we have, I think, some information about the Unsheltered provider. There's also the prioritization report. I have a sort of an executive summary of what that report does and what everything means, and there's just very detailed information about how this report works. So if you ever get confused about how this report is pulling clients, or if anything like this, you might want to go to our help desk portal and navigate through the pages there. And of course, as always, you can always email us at hmis@cohio.org as well. All right. Thanks, everyone.